Hey guys, I decided today to do a video during my lunch break, and this one is going to be my first Ask Me Anything video. Depending how many people interact, I may do more, but if no one interacts, obviously I won't keep doing it. So yeah, that's what this one is about, and so I'm gonna wait for some more people to come on, but while I'm waiting, um, I want to talk about how the someone recently emailed me earlier today, um, asking about one of my old websites, messianicescenes.wordpress.com, because I have made it obsolete, because there's some inaccurate information on that website, and I want to make a new website that's more accurate. So some of my old websites are I label as obsolete for the reason I don't want to deceive people into uh, believing incorrectly. That's why I have some of my old websites uh, labeled as such. So, anyways, I was I was talking with the guy in email, and he basically really loves the Essenes. Okay, so hey, this video today, I'm gonna do basically where you guys, whoever's on right now, it's just you, but you pretty much can ask me whatever you want on any subject, and I will share my opinion or perspective on it. I'm hoping that more people will participate in this going forward, but I thought we could try that out and see if anyone has things to say. Because when I did some of the videos a week or two ago, people seemed to have questions. Sometimes they had questions that weren't entirely related to what the subject was. So I figured, why not make a video exclusively answering people's questions. So since you're the only one, if you want to ask anything and what you're wondering my perspective is on, I'm happy to share my thoughts on that. But while I'm waiting to see if you're going to say anything, I basically was saying that someone emailed me this morning asking about one of my old websites, and basically he's interested in the Essenes, living like the Essenes did. And one of the interesting things about the Essenes is their way of living mirrors very closely the way of living of the early believers as described in the book of Acts. Acts chapter 2 and chapter 4 speaks of the believers living together in harmony, sharing everything with each other in a way almost identical to how the Essenes did it. So it leads me to believe that the Essenes were basically the Essenes became the early followers of the Messiah. I think the vast majority of the early believers were converts from the Essene group, and then as they developed over time, as they grew, they got Pharisees, Sadducees, and Gentiles. And of course, when you have a mixed bag like that, over time it can be easy to corrupt the truth. So when Gentiles come in, of course, the Gentiles are not well learned in the Hebrew scriptures, so they, more than anyone, are likely to corrupt the truth. But you also have the Pharisees, who their traditions were very much undermining the laws, and a lot of their ideas are similar to Christianity, interestingly enough. So in many ways, Christians fit the description of Pharisees. So and then the Sadducees as well, they did not believe in various theological doctrines of importance. And the they also had a smaller canon. So so the early believers were predominantly Essenes, and then as more started joining in, that's how it started falling away and getting corrupt. And I believe the Essenes were preserved through the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, or the Oriental Orthodox churches. That's their remnant, because they stopped identifying as Essenes, and they joined the church, but they joined the church that was most in line with their beliefs, and that, of course, is the Ethiopian Orthodox. But at the time, the Ethiopian Orthodox was actually part of the Coptic Orthodox Church, way back in those years, in the early years of Christianity. So the early followers who were the Essenes, they abided by the Oriental Orthodox concepts more. They were closer to them. And in general, the Asian churches or the Eastern churches were more in line with the teachings of the original apostles. They were more Mosaic in their concepts. Okay, so now the other person, there's two people on here, it says, so far. And basically this one's a little different than what I've been doing, where I'm basically going to have whoever's on just ask me whatever they want to ask me questions on. It could be anything, and I will answer. So, alright, so you asked... Oh, and I don't mind you interrupting, because that's what this particular video is about, to answer people's questions. So, what's my opinion on the dating of the Book of Daniel? So basically, so I disagree with scholars in that I don't agree with how they date books. So they date books mainly on if it prophesies of something, then that could not have been written by the true prophet, because they don't believe in prophecy. I believe in prophecy, so just because it predicts something doesn't necessarily mean it's false or written later. That being said, there's two things to keep in mind that with the prophet books. Most of the prophet books are copies, later copies of earlier documents. So I believe there was a core nucleus of the Book of Daniel that was his prophecies. Whether what we have, the Book of Daniel, I'm not sure Daniel actually wrote the Book of Daniel as we have it. So someone may have taken the Book of Daniel, or taken the prophecies of Daniel, and made a shorter account of it, or made a narrative. So the Book of Daniel in its current form may be later, but the prophecies, I believe, are authentic and come from the time of Daniel. But there are... Sorry about that, guys. There are... With that in mind, of what I was saying, the Book of Daniel has some manuscript variants that are significant. If you take the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, the Masoretic text is the Hebrew and Aramaic, and the Septuagint is the Greek version of the Book of Daniel. Now, what a lot of people know is that the Septuagint version has something called the additions to Daniel. But that's not what I'm talking about. In addition, the Septuagint version has extra stuff and variants. Like, it has extra clauses, different words, and sometimes an extra verse here and there. And also, one of the interesting things is it's in a different order. Some of the text is in a different order. And one other thing of note is that in the Masoretic text, the Book of Daniel has the section of Nebuchadnezzar speaking, but Nebuchadnezzar starts speaking out of nowhere, and there's no transition. So on a cursory glance, as you're reading, it sounds like it's Daniel talking, but it's actually or someone else talk. It just starts talking. There's no introduction, and Nebuchadnezzar just starts speaking. The Septuagint, because it's arranged differently, it actually doesn't have that. I think it has an introduction. Now you could argue that the Septuagint changed that to make it to remove that confusion, and they added a clarification that he was speaking. But so these are different types of issues with Daniel, and not just with Daniel. There's all the other books of the Old Testament have these same type of issues of variance. But so that's what I would say for Daniel. I think the book of Daniel is authentic. It is true prophecy, but it is corrupted like all the other books. So we keep that in mind. And one example of how I believe the scriptures are corrupted, but I accept the prophecy, would be the prophecy of Isaiah. So in the book of Isaiah, there's actually, in the Masoretic text and in the Septuagint, there is a prophecy of Cyrus by name. Okay, so there's a prophecy by his actual name. So what I believe is that the original text of Isaiah did not have the reference to Cyrus. It did not mention his name. It did have the prophecy, but it did not have the specification of his name. So I believe later scribes added Cyrus into it to tell the reader that it's talking about Cyrus. If this is true, that what I have said, then the original text, if it did not mention Cyrus, then it's possible that the prophecy is not about Cyrus, it is about someone else. So things like this can be significant. If Cyrus was added into the text, the prophecy may be referring to someone else. So we keep that in mind when coming to these type of ideas of some of these verses being corrupted. Some of the possible original readings may have been referring to something different, and then the scribes changed it and gave its interpretation. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this, where basically the, let's see here. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys. Do any guys have any questions as I'm trying to get my thought back? Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. Man, I can't believe I forgot what I was going to say. What I'll probably do, if I can't remember, is I will re-watch this video and then maybe put in the comments or something. But, so, are there any other questions that you guys have? I hope you guys have been having a good week, and I think you said you live in Germany, is that correct? And because I'm trying to think of, if I start doing I might start doing, well, I plan on doing a video series on Shabbat, and so I'm thinking for those in other countries, like, what would be the best time for me to do it on Shabbat? Like, because I live in the Eastern time zone, so right now it's a little after noon for me, 12 p.m. So if I were to do a Shabbat study, it wouldn't necessarily be Shabbat for you guys anymore, but it would still be enjoyable for people and insightful. So what time works for you in Germany, or is there not really a good time because of the time difference? And you might do stuff on Sabbath, I don't know. And anyone else here, what time would you guys be most available for me to do a study on the Sabbath on a regular basis? It's evening, okay. I mean, I could perhaps do something around noontime, like I'm doing now. That's an option. So, So I'm going to just start talking and see if I remember. I'm going to go back to the Isaiah thing. So basically, also what's interesting is there are many variants between the Septuagint Isaiah and Masoretic Isaiah. So, and some of the differences are significant. So my version of Isaiah is going to be very unique because it's going to be based heavily on the Septuagint while also trying to make sense of the possible Hebrew readings. And I recently just bought a book of Isaiah from a new version of the book of Isaiah that scholars have worked on. It's a Hebrew edition and utilizes all the variants of the Dead Sea Scrolls copies of Isaiah. And spoken word. What I'm doing here is basically whoever's on can ask questions on any subject, and I'd be happy to answer them. That's what this video is about. So I do remember what I was going to talk about. So basically, the Psalms of David. You know, David wrote those Psalms, and why did he write those Psalms? He wrote them about himself, about his own experiences. Later people like the Dead Sea Scroll writers, the Essenes, and the early followers of the Messiah, the apostles and Jesus, Yeshua himself, they quoted the Psalms of David and gave them a messianic spin. They applied them to Yeshua as messianic prophecy, which I do believe is a valid thing to do, but at the same time, they were not intended by the author to be prophecy. David, when he made those Psalms, he was not intending it to be prophetic in any way, shape, or form. Instead, he was describing his own experience. So when David wrote, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He was not talking about the Messiah. He did not have the Messiah in mind at all. It was about David's experience. David felt forsaken. So when we read the book of Psalms, we need to be careful of exclusively reading it in the lens of Christianity, in the lens of the Messiah, in the lens of how does it apply to me. That's one way to read the Psalms, and it's a valid way, but it's not the only way. And Christianity's emphasis on that has lost the original intention of the Psalm. The Psalm was talking about David's life. So if you study the Psalms by looking at what happened to David, how do these Psalms relate to David's life? Then suddenly the Psalms open up and have a different message. It has a very different message. Okay, the question is, does the Great Isaiah Scroll agree more with the Masoretic text or the Septuagint? So that's a difficult question because it seems like the Septuagint translates more freely in some places. Also, it is evident that some of the Hebrew was divided differently. Like, for example, everlasting Father in the Hebrew text is a two words. In the Masoretic text is considered two different words. Also in the Isaiah scroll, it's two different words. In the Septuagint, that word, it's one word. And instead of everlasting Father, it's actually a verb, because in the first person, imperfect, it has the letter Aleph. And that letter Aleph signifies that it's first person, singular, imperfect. But the same letters, when split into two different words, mean everlasting Father. So there's things like that all throughout the Septuagint. So I would say that the Hebrew text of the Isaiah scroll is the Septuagint comes from a Hebrew text that's far closer to the Isaiah scroll rather than the Masoretic text. But there are many things in the Isaiah scroll which agree with the Masoretic text and not the Septuagint. So it's kind of a middle position, I would say. And not only that, Isaiah scroll is one of the most edited scrolls in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think it is the most edited. Basically, someone wrote out the entire Isaiah scroll, and then I think it was that same scribe then went back and compared it with other manuscripts of Isaiah and started changing things to make it agree with other manuscripts. So that means multiple forms could be confused and put together. That's what happened in the Isaiah scroll. Sorry guys again. So the multiple Hebrew manuscripts of Isaiah was used to make the Isaiah scroll. And so probably what happened is there was a very different Hebrew copy, and then the scribe probably looked at a version closer to the Masoretic text and copied some of those readings into the text. And then apparently, according to the scholars, there was a different scribe who then looked through it again and changed things again and added things in, sometimes the scribes actually delete stuff. They delete stuff by either crossing the line through it or trying to erase it, like actually like smearing it so that it fades and then they can write over it. Other times they wrote it into the margin or above the word, like sort of like how we do like a little, we have that little arrow that's pointing upwards, and then you write it above the line, the word. So that is what they did often, but they didn't have the arrow. They just wrote it above the line, typically. I don't know why my phone gives me these problems. But yeah, it's when I'm on my phone that I'm having these issues. Anyways, I'm getting close to when I have to end this. Did anyone want to say any final things? Any final thoughts here? Spoken Word said, I read that the Great Isaiah Scroll was a copy of the original. I don't believe that. There's too many issues with it. I don't think it's a copy of the original. I think it's a very heavily copied document. It's very valuable, very important, but not. I don't think we can say the Isaiah Scroll is the original Hebrew of Isaiah. I don't believe it. But I think it's very key to reconstructing the original Hebrew. You asked my opinion on the original languages of the Gospels. I currently believe it's Hebrew. But then again, Hebrew and Aramaic were very similar in those times. So I do believe it was Aramaic. I believe it was Hebrew. But that I think the Greek manuscripts were sometimes copied or translated from Aramaic copies. So the Hebrew may have been translated into Aramaic and then translated into Greek in some instances. Because there's places in the Gospels which have transliteration of Hebrew words, and sometimes it's transliteration of Aramaic words. So I don't know if I need to clear space on my phone or something, memory or something, or maybe it's the app that gives me this problem, or maybe I'm shaking the phone too much in it. So I'm not sure exactly what's causing the problem. But anyways, just about to end it. Any final thoughts, questions? You can ask a final question and then I can answer it in the comments, because I don't think I'll have time to answer it. Thank you guys for coming on. Hopefully this was an interesting video. Hopefully if I do this more, that more people will join in, because not a lot were here this time, but that's okay. Also, people probably working too. So, all right, I think I'm gonna end it here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will, not this week, not this Shabbat, but starting the first Shabbat of the new 2020 year, I will be doing videos on the Sabbath. So anyways, see you guys later, and have a good week, have a good weekend. Shalom.